The night my mother said I was dead weight at my own sister's engagement dinner, my boyfriend sat right beside me, smiling politely, fully aware he had used my work behind my back. If I had to pinpoint the exact second my old life cracked, it was that moment, me sitting under two bright restaurant lights, dressed in a sale rack dress that suddenly felt 2 sizes too small, with a fake gold necklace clawing at my neck, trying to swallow the taste of betrayal while my family laughed over the sound of my heart breaking. I am going to tell you this like I would if we were in my kitchen right now, late at night, socks on, mugs between our hands, my mascara half gone. No filters, no polished version. Just the ugly, embarrassing truth. My name is Lauren. I am 25 years old. For most of my life, my family has treated me like the unfinished draft next to my younger sister's final copy, and I let them. I let them until my boyfriend turned out to be part of the same story, and I realized the only way to survive was to set the whole script on fire. Let me back up just enough so you understand how deep this runs. My sister's name is Emily. 2 years younger than me, and the kind of girl people call effortless. She has the kind of face that photographs well from every angle, a laugh that travels across rooms, a talent for making adults adore her. Growing up, teachers remembered her. I was the one they confused with another kid from the back row. Our mother, Sandra, worked in retail her whole life and secretly believed that life's meaning was determined by how good your family looked on holidays. She always said she wanted her daughters to do better than she did, but what she really meant was that she wanted us to look like we were doing better. Emily obliged. She studied business in college, joined a sorority, landed an internship at a shiny marketing firm, and came home for holidays with perfect hair and stories about office life that made our mother's eyes glow. By 23, she was dating Daniel, a rising star at some investment firm whose parents owned a lake house and used cloth napkins. I, on the other hand, did not fit the picture so well. I studied media production at a state university, worked 2 jobs to cover what my scholarships didn't, and graduated into a market where everyone wanted video content but nobody wanted to pay for it. I freelanced. I edited wedding videos and small business promos and sometimes got paid in gift cards. Our mother called what I did cute. She said it like she was patting a child on the head who was playing shop with plastic money. I could have gone into corporate. A couple of times I almost did. But there was this restless part of my brain that lit up when I was building something from scratch, helping a tiny account grow, watching analytics move because of a story I shaped in a video. It was the only time I felt powerful. Useful on my own terms. So when a small tech startup reached out and said they had seen some of my work online and wanted to hire me as their in-house content manager, I said yes before I even finished reading the email. The company was called Brightlane. At that time, we were 6 people crammed into a former dentist's office above a bakery. Our CEO, Tom, was the kind of founder who gave off equal parts chaos and sincerity. The product was a logistics platform for small e-commerce businesses, a boring description for something quietly smart, an app that helped small sellers route, track, and predict their deliveries with almost zero budget. I loved it. I loved the ugly little office, the smell of burned coffee, the whiteboards covered in messy plans, the way everyone wore 3 hats and nobody had time to pretend. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was somewhere at the start of something important. But in my family's world, important only meant visible. I tried to explain to my mother what we did. She blinked, nodded, then asked me if we had a real office yet or just that dingy thing above the bakery. She told relatives at barbecues that Emily worked for a proper firm in the city and that I did internet videos. She said it with a little smile, like I was a child with a hobby. Then there was Jake. My boyfriend. We met at a friend of a friend's birthday, one of those nights where everyone is drinking Prosecco from plastic cups and yelling over somebody's playlist. Jake was funny in a low-key way, charming enough without being flashy, the kind of guy who listened as much as he talked. He asked about my work, and when I told him I did content at a startup, he actually asked follow-up questions. He said he worked in sales at a large logistics company. He liked that we were in the same general universe. We started having these long conversations about how clumsy big corporations were about storytelling, how small businesses understood their customers better. It felt like we were on the same side. He met my family. My mother liked him immediately. He wore a shirt with buttons, brought flowers, and knew how to talk about work in a way she understood: stable, benefits, name on a building. Emily said he was cute and joked that finally one of us had decent taste. Jake met my coworkers too. He came by the office once with coffee for everyone, charmed them, asked Tom intelligent questions about the product. He said he was impressed by what we were doing, that Bright Lane had serious potential. So when he started asking more specific questions about our plans, our target market, our roadmap, I didn't think much of it at first. We both worked in related fields. It made sense that he was curious. I liked feeling like my work mattered enough to be worth discussing seriously. The tiny alarm bell in my chest stayed quiet. Around that time, Bright Lane hit a rough patch. Our main investor pulled out unexpectedly, leaving us scrambling for runway. Tom called a meeting, the kind where everyone is sitting on folding chairs in the tiny conference room, trying not to show how scared they are. He told us we had maybe 6 months left if nothing changed. That we could survive if we brought in some bigger clients fast, or if we landed a partnership with a larger logistics firm that would white label our tech. I went home that night with panic buzzing under my skin. Jake wrapped his arms around me on my couch and told me that startups always had near-death experiences. That it would work out. That I was too talented to end up nowhere. He said this as if his words alone could alter our bank accounts. Then he suggested something. He mentioned that his own company had been looking into tools like what we offered. He said he could casually mention Bright Lane to his manager, see if there was interest. A pilot program, maybe. Some kind of partnership. He made it sound small, harmless. Tom was desperate enough to say yes to anything. The next few weeks were a blur. Jake kept saying that things were moving, that his manager was interested, that there were calls happening above his pay grade. Tom took a couple of mysterious meetings, came back looking hopeful but tight-lipped. I asked Jake what he thought. He said these things took time. Meanwhile, Emily's life was accelerating in a straight line. She got promoted. She started planning a Europe trip with Daniel. Then one Sunday, she announced during lunch that they were engaged. Our mother screamed and cried and hugged everyone. The table shook with the force of her joy. Drinks spilled. Photos were taken. Emily's diamond caught the light and threw her back in my face. My mother kept saying that finally one of her daughters was doing it right, and she only half caught herself when she added that out loud. She hugged me too, eventually, but it was the kind of distracted side hug you give a guest, not a co-star. Later, in the kitchen, over dishwater and leftovers, she told me she just wanted me to find someone stable too. Someone who could take care of me. She said it as if I wasn't already taking care of myself. She said it as if my job, my tiny company, my messy hopefulness were all a phase. I didn't tell her that by then I was the one quietly paying my own rent, my own bills, my own everything, while also covering small emergencies for them when they fell short. That I had helped with Jamie's school trip. That I had spot paid the electricity once when she called me crying. None of that factored into her definition of being taken care of. I just nodded and swallowed. Somewhere during all that, Bright Lane closed a deal. Not the one Jake had hinted at. Something else. A mid-sized national delivery chain wanted to use our tech for a new same-day service. It was not glamorous, but it was big. Tom announced it with his eyes suspiciously shiny. We were safe for another year. A week later, I saw the news that Jake's company had acquired a small tech platform that sounded suspiciously like ours, but was not ours. They had gone with a competitor. When I asked Jake about it, he shrugged and said things had changed above him, that his manager liked the other option better, that it was not his call. He looked genuinely sad when he said it. I believed him. The first real crack came from somewhere else. I was at Jake's place, idly scrolling on his iPad while he took a shower. A notification popped up from a group chat I had never seen before. The preview line showed my name. I know you are not supposed to look. There are rules about privacy and trust. But I saw my own name on the screen, and curiosity is a beast with sharp teeth when you have spent years being left out of conversations. I opened it. It was a chat between Jake, his manager, and someone from the competitor company. Messages about decks and demos and feature lists. Screenshots. And then my words. Not exactly my words. But close enough. Phrases from internal strategy documents I had written for Brightling. Unique language. A tagline I had sweated over for hours. Jake had sent them pieces of our plans. The messages were weeks old. The last one was from his manager, promising him a bonus and a possible promotion if the acquisition went smoothly. The next message, from Jake, said he would handle me. That he would keep me from pushing Brightling too hard toward his company. He called me an inside softness point. Like I was a bruise they could push to steer us away. I put the iPad down carefully, like it was something contaminated. The sound of running water in the bathroom suddenly felt aggressive, like white noise over a scream. I sat there on his bed, my heart racing so fast it felt like it might detach, and realized two things at once. He had used me. And my intuition had been screaming weeks ago, and I had shushed it like a child. When he came out of the bathroom, towel around his waist, hair damp, asking me what I wanted to watch, I said nothing about what I had seen. Not yet. Not because I wanted to protect him. Because I needed space to think. You know that feeling when the floor gives way beneath you and for a second you don't fall, you just hover? That is where I was. I left his apartment an hour later with some flimsy excuse about feeling sick. On the sidewalk, cool air hit my face and I finally let myself gasp. I could have called Tom right then. I could have marched into our office with screenshots. Instead, I did something my mother would never have expected. I kept my mouth shut until I had a plan. Which brings us to the engagement dinner. Emily wanted it at this polished rooftop restaurant downtown, all glass and brass and views. Daniel's parents offered to cover half the cost, and my mother almost cried again. I chipped in quietly, sending Emily money for the photographer she wanted, because I knew our mother could not. The night of the dinner, I stood in front of my mirror, trying on the only dress I owned that looked expensive, even though it was not. I did my own makeup. I curled my hair in messy waves. I looked decent. Not stunning. Not Emily level. But not invisible. Jake texted that he would meet me there. I stared at his name on my screen for a long time. I had not confronted him yet. Part of me wanted to blow the whole thing up in front of everyone, to drag his betrayal into the light and watch it burn. Another part of me wanted to handle it quietly, keep my messy personal life away from a night that was supposed to be for my sister. I chose quiet. It was the last time I would choose quiet for someone else's comfort. The restaurant was even more beautiful in person. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the city, soft lighting, candles flickering in glass cylinders, a long table set with white linen and more cutlery than I knew what to do with. Emily looked stunning. Of course she did. Sleek dress, flawless hair, a glow that came from being adored. Daniel hovered near her, his hand on the small of her back, smiling at everyone like he had been born to host. My mother fluttered from person to person, introducing herself, making small talk, soaking up the way the staff treated her like someone important just for being there. Jake arrived, kissed my cheek, told me I looked amazing, like nothing was wrong. I almost laughed. We sat. We toasted. Speeches were made. At some point, after the second round of wine, my mother decided it was a good moment to freestyle a speech of her own. She stood, glass in hand, face flushed. She talked about Emily, how proud she was, how she had always known Emily would do great things, how Emily had always been so focused and stylish and determined. Then she pivoted to me. She said she was proud of me too, of course, but in a different way. She said some kids make you proud with their achievements, and others, well, they teach you patience. The table laughed. I went cold. She kept going. She said she hoped one day I would find something stable, maybe marry a nice steady guy like Jake, so she could stop worrying that I would be alone editing little internet videos forever. I felt everyone's eyes flick briefly toward me, then away, like I was a minor plot point in the main story. Jake tensed beside me. He did not say anything. He did not correct her, did not mention Bright Lane, did not point out that my work had helped keep a company alive. He stared at his plate. I waited for that to hurt more than it did. Instead, I felt something else. I felt tired. So tired. Of being the punching bag. The side character. The one people made jokes about because they assumed I would absorb them and smile. The thing is, that night did not just belong to my family. It also belonged to my job. What nobody at that table knew was that Bright Lane had just signed the biggest partnership of its existence. Not with Jake's company. With a competitor of his. An international shipping group that saw value in small business tools. We had been invited to the same restaurant for a low-key celebration and informal meet and greet with their senior leadership. Same night. Same floor. Different side. Tom had told me to come by after I finished with my family, to at least say hello, because the partner's COO had specifically mentioned my work in the pitch decks. So when my mother sat down again, satisfied with the laugh she had gotten at my expense, and the conversation moved on to honeymoon plans, I made a choice. I excused myself. I stood up, smoothed my dress, and said I needed to use the restroom. Jake squeezed my hand under the table but did not look at me. Emily smiled, distracted. Nobody asked where I was really going. I walked across the restaurant, past other tables, past a bar, to the private room at the other end. There was a small plaque on a stand with the name of the shipping group. I could hear laughter inside. I paused at the door, my heart hammering. In my head, I heard my mother's voice telling someone that I did internet videos. I opened the door. Inside, the room was warm and buzzing. Tom stood near the head of the table, shoulders relaxed in a way I had not seen all year. Several people in suits sat with him, drinks in hand, talking animatedly. Tom's face lit up when he saw me. He beckoned me over and introduced me. He told them I was the one who had led the content that doubled our inbound leads, that my campaigns had turned our boring tech into something small business owners actually understood. He said I was a big part of why we were all in that room. My cheeks burned, but in a different way than at my family's table. One of the executives, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a genuine smile, said she was glad to finally meet me in person. She told me my name had come up more than once in their internal meetings. She said they were interested in doing more than just using our tools. They were considering a deeper partnership. She used words like equity, expansion, shared leadership. Then, right there, in that warm room with strangers who somehow saw more of me than my family did, she said something that made my world tilt. She told me they were looking for someone to lead a new joint storytelling division for small business clients, someone who understood both content and logistics, someone who could be the face of a program they wanted to roll out nationwide. She asked if I had ever considered being a director, not just a manager. The question landed in a part of me that had been waiting quietly for years. Tom grinned at me like a proud older brother. He told her they would be lucky to have me lead anything. I said my throat felt tight because the air was dry. Really, it was because my entire sense of myself was rearranging. We talked logistics. Not the shipping kind. My salary. My role. The transition plan. They wanted things to move quickly. They already had a press release draft. The only missing piece was my full agreement. The executive glanced at her watch and said something about timing. There was an industry event in 3 weeks where they would be announcing several new initiatives. She wanted me on that stage. My imposter syndrome tried to claw its way up my throat. But another voice, louder now, pushed it down. The voice that remembered every time my mother had minimized me. Every time Emily had rolled her eyes at my job. Every time Jake had smiled while feeding my work to someone else. I said yes. My hand shook, but I said yes. We clinked glasses. Tom squeezed my shoulder. Then the executive said they actually had someone else arriving shortly, someone who had asked to meet me personally. One of their board members, a well-known CEO in the broader logistics tech world. He wanted to talk about how content and narrative could shift an entire sector. I had heard his name before. So had Jake. The board member walked in 5 minutes later, apologizing for traffic. He was in his mid-50s, calm and sharp, the kind of man who had become rich by seeing patterns before others did. He shook my hand firmly, held my gaze, and asked me to tell him in my own words what Bright Lane did and why it mattered. I talked. He listened. Then he said he had been tracking some of our campaigns for months and wanted to explore giving me a budget that would make my current one look like lunch money. He laughed when he said that. I did too. In the middle of that laugh, the door opened. A staff member stepped in, looking flustered. She said there was a bit of a situation in the main dining area and asked if anyone from Bright Lane was at the other event. She kept glancing over her shoulder. Tom frowned and asked what was wrong. The staff member hesitated, then said there had been a misunderstanding at one of the tables involving a guest from the other party claiming that one of our people was lying about their job. My stomach dropped. I knew, without knowing how, that this was about me. I excused myself, ignoring Tom's concerned look and the executive's raised brow, and followed the staff member back through the restaurant. I could hear it before I saw it. My mother's voice. Not just raised. Sharp. Accusing. I rounded the corner to our engagement dinner table and took in the scene. My mother stood by her chair, one hand on the back, the other holding a napkin like it was evidence. Her face was red. Emily sat, wide-eyed, clutching her water glass. Daniel looked uncomfortable. A couple of older relatives watched with avid expressions, the way people watch reality shows. Jake was standing. So was another man. A man in a suit with my new partner company's pin on his lapel. Recognition slammed into me. He was one of the executives I had just met. He looked equally confused and irritated. My mother saw me. She said loudly that it was about time I stopped hiding. That I needed to stop lying to people about who I was and what I did. My brain scrambled through possibilities. Lying? I had never lied about what I did. They just never listened long enough to understand. I stepped closer, heat creeping up my neck. I asked, as calmly as I could, what was going on. She launched into a story about how she had overheard me talking to someone at the bar earlier and had realized I was telling people I was some kind of director. She said she had corrected it, told them I was just editing little videos for a tiny company, that I liked to exaggerate. The executive had apparently tried to explain that he knew exactly who I was and what I did. Jake had gotten involved, trying to smooth things over, but somehow making it worse by mumbling that things were complicated. My mother had taken that as confirmation that I had misled everyone. She said she would not sit by and watch her daughter embarrass the family by pretending to be more than she was. Every word she threw landed like a slap. The staff member looked mortified. The other diners pretended not to stare and failed. I felt the eyes of my new world on my old world and wanted to disappear. Before I could respond, the executive who had just been in the back room with me stepped up beside me. She had followed, quietly. So had Tom. And behind them, the board member. This was no longer just a family scene. This was a collision. The executive answered before I could. She said, in a voice that carried but did not shout, that there was no misunderstanding. She said that Lauren was not lying. She said that they had just formally offered me the director role I had mentioned, leading a joint initiative between Bright Lane and their firm. She said that as far as she was concerned, I was one of the most capable people in the room. Silence. My mother opened her mouth, closed it. Jake went pale. Emily looked between us all like she was trying to do the math. The executive then did something I did not expect. She turned to Jake. She said that she recognized him, that her colleagues had mentioned a sales rep from his company who had been unusually interested in our tech months ago. She said she found it interesting that he was here, involved in a scene accusing me of lying, when his own digital fingerprint was all over the competitor's acquisition. Her tone was mild. The words were not. Tom's head snapped toward Jake. Tom had not known that part. I had not told him yet. But she had done her own checking. Or someone in her office had. Jake started to stammer something about coincidence. The board member stepped in then. He said that while he did not know the family history here, he knew business, and he knew pattern recognition, and the pattern he saw was not flattering to Jake. He said that leaking internal phrasing and concepts from one company to another was not only unethical but potentially illegal. Our mother looked between the men, confused. She started to say that Jake would never. I cut in. My voice was steady in a way it had not been all night. I told them, quietly but clearly, that I had seen the messages on his iPad. The ones where he shared my work. The ones where he said he would keep me from pushing Bright Lane toward his company. Each word tasted like metal. Jake froze. His eyes met mine. For a second, under all his practiced charm, I saw something small and ugly. Not guilt. Annoyance. He was annoyed that I had found out. He tried to step toward me, hand half raised. He started to say my name, to tell me I was being emotional, that it was not how I thought. I took a step back. I told him I did not need his explanations. I had listened to enough of his voice in my head for months. I said it as calmly as you would comment on the weather. The executive, the board member, even a couple of distant relatives nodded almost imperceptibly. It was not the dramatic explosion my mother's speeches had been. It was worse. It was clarity. My mother sat down slowly, as if her legs were suddenly tired. She muttered that she had just been trying to keep me from humiliating myself. The executive looked at her for a long second. Then she said that from where she stood, the only humiliation tonight was watching a capable young woman minimized by the people who were supposed to be her first believers. The words landed on the table like heavy stones. No one rushed to pick them up. The board member suggested that maybe this was not the best environment to discuss business further. He turned to me and said their offer stood. That they would be in touch with the contract in the morning. He added quietly, just for me, that sometimes you had to succeed loudly in front of the people who hurt you, not to win them over, but to prove to yourself you had never needed their approval. Then he and the executive and Tom went back to their room. The staff stepped in to smooth the scene. The engagement dinner limped on, thinner, more brittle. Daniel tried to make small talk. Emily forced a smile. People ate their dessert with more focus than it deserved. Jake left without saying goodbye. My mother drank too much wine and complained about the cost of everything. I sat there, oddly calm. My heart hurt, yes. My cheeks flamed with remnants of shock and humiliation. But underneath that, there was a steady sense of something new. Something final. When the night was over and we stood in the cool air outside the restaurant, waiting for rides, my mother touched my arm. She said she had not meant to embarrass me. She said she was just scared that I would pretend to be something I was not and crash later. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who had spent her whole life terrified of being laughed at, and had decided the best defense was to laugh at her own child first. I told her I understood she was scared. Then I told her something that made her flinch. I said that I was done letting her fear be my ceiling. She scoffed. She said I was being dramatic. I said I loved her. I really do. But I also said I would no longer let her talk about me like I was a punchline. Silence. Then she did what she always did when cornered, she turned away, muttering that I was ungrateful. Maybe I am. Ungrateful for being kept small. Ungrateful for being used. Ungrateful for being told my whole life that I should just be happy with whatever scraps of respect I could get. The next morning, the contract arrived in my inbox. Director of Story and Small Business Growth Initiative. Salary more than double what I was making. Stock options. My own team. I stared at the screen, at my name in that title, and cried in my tiny kitchen, not because of the money, but because for the first time, someone had written my worth down in a way that matched how I secretly saw myself on my best days. I signed. I forwarded the legal parts to a lawyer friend of Tom's to review, just to be sure. I turned in my resignation as content manager and accepted the director role, still within Bright Lane but now also within this larger partner structure. A month later, I stood on a stage at an industry conference, lights hot, cameras on, and talked about small businesses, logistics, storytelling, and how the right narrative can change the trajectory of an entire company. Somewhere in the audience, I saw my mother. Emily had dragged her there. She sat in the third row, her purse on her lap, looking wildly out of place among suits and name tags. But she was there. She watched me speak. She watched the crowd respond. She watched people line up to talk to me afterward. She watched an older woman she did not know congratulate me and call me impressive. Later, in the lobby, she approached me. She had tears in her eyes. She said she did not understand half of what I had talked about. She said she did understand that other people took me seriously. She said she was sorry. Not for the first time. But that day, I believed her a little. Maybe because I no longer needed her to. I walked out of that building not as the girl whose mother called her dead weight, not as the girlfriend whose work had been stolen, not as the sister who lived in the shadow. I walked out as the woman who had finally realized the most shocking thing of all. They could mock me. They could use me. They could doubt me. But none of that had ever changed what I was capable of. The only betrayal that really mattered now would be if I ever went back to pretending I was small.